Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Fascinating SEC matchup every single year. Florida heading on the road to play Tennessee. And Dill, I thought Florida was pretty impressive against UCF. Obviously, Tennessee, not so much on the road against Arkansas. And I feel like this game, when you're talking about it, you're previewing it, you're predicting it, I feel like it has so much to do with what you think about Tennessee after that loss against Arkansas. And you go back 7 days ago, like the boys were banging the table for Tennessee, largely been your darling pretty much all season long. Now you're kind of looking at Tennessee and say, maybe we have more question marks about the Vols than we thought we had 7 days ago. Now, I'll be very clear. I still think this is a national championship caliber team. Like, there's still a lot about this Tennessee team that I like. But there are some things I want to see answered and cleaned up moving forward from this Tennessee team. We're going to get into some of those talking points now. Before we get into it, as always, most importantly, would love to hear from y'all in the comment section. A lot of different opinions, I'm sure, are had about this football game. Let it fly. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And Dill, without further ado, let's get into this one. And I'll open it up to you, right? Our resident Tennessee expert. You've loved Tennessee going back to the offseason. What do you think went wrong for this Tennessee offense Saturday night against Arkansas?
Well, I think first of all, it starts with taking too many penalties. A lot of pre-snap
Yes.
penalties, obviously an ineligible man downfield that certainly hurt them. And they just got themselves in a game that they really don't want to be in. They ended up in third and long, second and long for a fair amount of that football game. And that it prevented them from grinding down Arkansas, first of all, because really when they had the chances to run the ball like you want to run it, they were doing a pretty good job with it. They were getting that kind of 4 or 5 yard gain. Obviously, Sampson then rips off that big one, but they really do need to stay out of those third and long, second and long kind of positions and not make it the Nico show. Because I think that is one now question that Tennessee has to answer is can it be that? Can he be that guy to dig him out of holes? Because he really
That's my biggest question mark. And quite frankly, I know we didn't have that answer. Like, we never saw Nico have to go out and win a football game with how good Tennessee's been able to run the football throughout the 2024 year. We kind of had to see that, and we didn't see that against Arkansas. Now, I'll start with this. Like, I'm fully still very confident in Nico as a quarterback. I think he can be that guy for Tennessee, and he just didn't have a good game against Arkansas. But now it is a bigger question mark than we thought we had 7 days ago. I think some other concerns I had was I didn't think the offensive line was getting pass protection. Like, this was a Tennessee offensive line that they're hammers in the run game. That is for sure. No questions about that. But I thought both tackles struggled in this game,
even
specifically
struggled
Lancer.
to communicate. That was the big thing I thought. I mean, you saw those blitzes that obviously
Yes.
Arkansas was trying to throw at him. And frankly, you look at kind of Florida's key to this game or something you want to see if they can do it is can they replicate that? Can they get their linebackers involved, their safeties involved? Because that to me is what was really throwing Arkansas or Tennessee for a loop is they just really struggled to pick up from that 3-man down line, picking up the pressure from the second level. They really didn't do a good job.
100% agree with that. And I think the second question mark, and again, it's a lot of Tennessee fans were frustrated with Nico's performance, and Nico wasn't nearly good enough. And you can tell he was uncomfortable from the get go, like dropping snaps, balls hitting the ground. It was just kind of out of not on his game, you might say. Saturday night, offensive line struggled in pass protection, like you said with the communication. But I also thought the pass catchers maybe weren't as much difference makers as we maybe thought they had heading in. Like Brew McCoy, kind of a non-factor. Dante Thornton had an explosive play, but it kind of came late. I didn't think the pass catchers necessarily made a huge impact on that football game. I
Now,
thought
Nico
Arkansas,
certainly missed some throws. I mean, obviously, he has
yes,
Squirrel White down the field. Squirrel White has a good bit of separation. Got to hit that. That's
yeah,
kind of what
yep.
Joe Milton couldn't do for them. Nico needs to be able to make those plays if Tennessee's kind of going to reach their goals. Now, he's mostly done that. He did it against Oklahoma. He did it against NC State. But those weren't really particularly close games at the times he was
And
supposed to
also,
make.
like, yeah, you're kind of right. Like, Oklahoma, NC State, like that wasn't like the high pressure, like gotta have it kind of throws because Tennessee was doing what they wanted against those teams. There wasn't a ton of pressure put on Nico. And again, we've seen Nico make those throws. There's a reason he was a 5-star out of high school, but you want to see him put it together on a big stage. Dill, you look at Florida, I think that's probably the biggest question is can Coach Roberts, Austin Armstrong dial it up and give Tennessee some problems on the offensive line. But I think secondly, I just have really big question mark on it if Florida can just stop this Tennessee rushing attack. Like Florida did a solid job of it against UCF, but they struggled in some other games, specifically against Texas A&M, stopping the run. This, I still believe, is one of the better rushing attacks that we see in all of college football. You got to think that Tennessee is going to lean on the rushing attack to kind of settle Nico down. And once you are able to establish the run, then I think you maybe let Nico maybe air it out a little bit more and gain some more confidence.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you don't want to go into a one-dimensional attack if you're Tennessee, but at the end of the day, I think we've now seen the recipe is they're similar to how Michigan was last year, where JJ's a really good quarterback, but you saw when they got into not being able to run the football, Michigan's offense certainly didn't look the same. I think, again, do I have any doubts about Nico as a quarterback? Not really. But I feel like the recipe is pretty established where I don't think you want to get into a position where you can't run it. And frankly, you look at Florida, I'm not sure I have a ton of confidence in them stopping the run, especially when Tennessee wants to just physically impose themselves, because there is too much like pile moving in that type of not being physical at the point.
And I think another really big question for Florida in this game is like Tennessee wants to run with pace. They want to run a lot of plays. Florida's not very deep on the defensive line. Like they might be having to go to some true freshmen that I like, but I don't know if you want to be relying on for 20 snaps in this football game. So Florida's ability to stop the run, paramount. But I think more importantly, if Tennessee is able to stay on the football field and get that run game going, like does Florida have the depth to play 4 quarters with this Tennessee team? Probably my second question mark in this game. Now, flipping sides, Dale, I think the biggest question mark, Florida in pass protection. Like, even though Tennessee on defense gave up a lot of yards, they're still very disruptive in that front seven. They kind of whooped Arkansas at times in the front seven, but Taylor Green, they had the athleticism to avoid some of that pressure. I don't think Graham Mertz has that kind of athleticism. So if you're Florida on the offensive line, which has struggled against elite pass rushes, I get they look good against UCF, but UCF is, I think, one of the worst front sevens that we see at the Power 4 level. My biggest question mark here is, can Tennessee's pass rush show up? Because Graham Mertz is, I think, a really good quarterback when he's clean, but the pass rush and the pass protection for Florida, it's been a problem, and I think it certainly could be a problem in this football game here.
And that's where I think the Lagway conversation has to be brought up, because at the end of the day, you look, I don't see a world that Florida really blocks this Tennessee offensive line. I don't think Florida's even quite as good as Arkansas's offensive line. They've really struggled, especially against good athletic fronts. I mean, Tennessee will be the best front they played. I know you're an A&M guy. I know you think the front
That's what I thought.
I don't think it's as good as Tennessee's. I don't think it's as deep as Tennessee's. So I look at it like, yeah, this will be the best unit they've played. Really struggled a lot against Miami, struggled against A&M. So they're just not going to block this team. That's where, again, Tennessee, some of the things you kind of talk about from the season before, scrambling quarterbacks. Hurt him last year. Connor Cook was able to, or Brady Cook, I should say, was able to hurt him at Mizzou. Other athletic quarterbacks were able to hurt that Tennessee defensive line. That's where you get, like, I think inherently Florida's going to need their quarterback to make a handful of those type of plays. And is Graham Mertz really the guy who gives you that good opportunity to do it? I don't really think so. DJ Lagway, on the other hand, at least has the athletic profile to do something like what Taylor Green was doing.
Agreed. And I think if you're Billy Napier here, you got to go to the quick game. If Graham Mertz is out there at quarterback, like the ball's got to be out of his hands quick. And that's a staple of Florida. Like even going back to last year, like they didn't push the ball down the field all that often because they couldn't hold up in pass protection. It's been better this year, but you still have question marks against what might be the best pass rush unit that we see in the country. If you're Florida, you do have some playmakers on the outside that can operate with the football in their hands. And again, Tennessee, they didn't tackle all that well against Arkansas in space. And so if you're Florida, you kind of saw the recipe a little bit. If there's one question mark we still have about this Tennessee defense, it's certainly not in the front seven. It's in the back end. You want to make these young cats and in cases inexperienced cats in the back end for Tennessee tackle Florida in space, because that.
Oh, and then you got to identify what exactly Bobby Petrino was doing, because that's about as lost as I've seen the Tennessee secondary look. I mean, they were leaving guys open, not regularly, but too many busts in coverage, too many wide open guys. Again, Bobby Petrino, I think they struggle a lot to deal with the running back out of the backfield at times. So, again, can Billy Napier identify any of those things that really did seem to confuse a guy like Arian Carter or some of the safeties in middle of the field kind of players for Tennessee? Because at the end of the day, I was really surprised to see them break down a couple of times because if they didn't, I mean, they couldn't. Arkansas couldn't handle them up front. That was pretty clear. But again, when they were able to get the ball out quickly, and Tennessee had a couple coverage busts, Arkansas
Yeah,
was able to rip some
if
big.
you're Tennessee, you got to get that cleaned up. And we thought, and it's kind of played out like we thought. There's not a ton of teams that can move the football consistently. You go back to that Oklahoma game, like Oklahoma couldn't deal with Tennessee up front, so they weren't really able to attack a secondary. But you did see that inexperienced Tennessee secondary finally kind of rear its ugly head. Now, if you're a Tennessee fan, I think the optimism is like it's a young, inexperienced group that I think certainly can get better.
It
Like
also
there are
wasn't like horrible. I don't want to make it seem like there were
agreed,
guys
agreed.
wide open all the time. It's not like Arkansas was moving the ball up
Yeah.
and down the field, but
They
there were
did
a
move the
couple.
football though. Like Arkansas just didn't operate in the red zone. Like that's my biggest concern if I'm Tennessee is like Arkansas could have scored more points in that football game. Like they had a decent amount of yards were in the inside the 10 at times and settling for field goals. You want to see the Tennessee defense get cleaned up, but I think we all know that that loss is much more
But
on the
also
offense.
that's part of football is being good in the red zone.
100%
Obviously, I
agreed.
think you see just man to man how much better Tennessee was at certain positions, especially at that defensive line. That makes it really, really hard. So again, if they can avoid those busting coverage, avoid giving Florida easy plays, I don't really see Florida having a great answer to just marching the ball down the field against this team just because of how much better this front seven is, especially in the front four, than what I think Florida's O-line is.
So getting to the pick here, 16-point favorites for Tennessee at home. Who you taking?
Tennessee. I love Tennessee. And I still have my questions about Florida. I think UCF might be really, really
Yeah,
bad.
they might be really bad.
One thing I think Tank Hawkins' emergence, I think, does give them another weapon. Obviously, with Wilson not being on the field, not being healthy, him, Badger, and DK is playing unbelievable.
Yeah.
I think they have a formidable wide receiver core and guys who, again, can maybe hurt Tennessee in the way that Arkansas could, especially if they can find themselves some space, because those guys can really test you in terms of how well you tackle.
I think this Florida offense is good outside the offensive line. And it's frustrating because it's the same conversation we had last year. But when you are playing in the SEC and you don't have an offensive line that can pass protect, it's hard to win games. And that's kind of where Florida's at once again. And I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes in with Billy Napier. It's like the same problem that we saw in 2023. You're not addressing it. I'm with you. I just very similar to how we talked about the Florida Miami game, where it's like I just don't see Florida consistently pass protecting and keeping the quarterback clean. You find yourself in too many of those big time negative plays. It's hard to stay in a football game. And I think you see a big rebound from Tennessee. Like I think they're going to get back to running the football. I don't think you're going to see as sloppy a play from the offensive line as we saw against Arkansas. Give me Tennessee as well. Going to be a fun one though. And I think we maybe get some questions answered about this Tennessee team. Give me the Vols. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Talk to y'all later. Peace.